what's up? It's Kit. Time for another video. Today, we talk about the connections. And this is the bit where we talk about the solid rings, split rings, and swivels if you're using that. If you're new to the channel, this channel talks about the hows and whys of fishing. We cover everything from big game, ultralight, everything in the middle, including fly fishing. And today, this whole connection thing is actually a topic that I really want to get into because there's some differences for the bigger stuff and obviously for this for the smaller stuff. Okay, so just for your reference, I'm actually using, this is my box full of stuff that I use for jigging mostly. There's some casting stuff here as well because there's some stuff that kind of interchange, but for the most part this is where I store all or majority of my my stuff for jigging, be it heavy jigging or light jigging, micro even. Okay, I have another box that I take with me most of the time for light jigging and specifically for casting. So it's right here, but I'm gonna be working off of the these two boxes, just FYI. Okay, now first and foremost, the biggest difference between light and heavier jigs, to be very brutally honest here, it's just really just a clip. Okay, so for light jigging, there are a lot of people that use clips because they're switching their lures a lot. Now when you're shallow water fishing, you snag, you tend to juggle weights around because it could be that you're faced with different current conditions and all that. But more than likely, what happens when you're fishing in shallower water, you have the luxury to fine-tune things. And this is where the clips come in. Now, I kind of don't like them. Okay, so a lot of people like them, and that's totally fine. But for me, I have long leaders, and I'd rather use one knot. Now, there are some clips that I actually use. Okay, so this is a very good example of a typical clip. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in just so that you would actually see. Okay, so you can see that this clip, this is a very typical clip, and it's made of thin wire. As you can see, that's the place where you snap. If I'm to use a clip, I'm not going to be using this because this part right here, it's not as solid as it should be. Okay, this is the clip that I recommend, and so you can see here, I'm actually taking it off of the box. It's something that if I use it, I'll use it. Okay, now this particular clip, if you look, that's welded. Okay, and also the shape, it's wider, which means that it gives the jig a bit more movement. Okay, so let me just that. Okay, so as you can see here, okay, it's also short and compact. Okay, compared to this one right here, you would see that the profile of this jig is actually, or the profile of this snap is actually shorter, and it is wider. At the same time, it's also stronger. So the very first bit for now, we're talking about this, the snap. This is kind of the biggest difference. Okay. Now, with that, okay, I'm gonna be tying my if I'm using this, okay, I'm gonna be tying my nail knot there. Sorry, not nail. I will be tying my um, chain knot. Okay, chain knot I'll be tying there. So it'll be here like so, and then that. But the reason why I don't like this is because it's a weak point, and I know a lot of people would probably argue, but see, the thing is, okay, and I'll show you my point. Now, for me, especially when you're scaling down, it's very important for me to actually have as little hardware as possible because I don't want weak points. It's as simple as that. Now, I would advise the guys that are starting out to actually do the same. Now, when you've grown a bit of experience and a bit of confidence, go ahead and play around. Okay. But I stick to the way where there's very little chances of failure. And I found that going as simple as possible with as little hardware as possible gives you that. Now, especially on the smaller stuff. Now, with this, okay, you count how many failure points you have, and it's very easy to actually, let's focus again. It's very easy to actually see. Okay, so your knot is always going to be a failure point. So one, and then that's another failure point, and that's another failure point. So there's three. Now for this particular snap, it's actually just two. So I've eliminated one because that's welded. Okay, so that might open. Okay, and my knot might pop. But if I because remember from there you have your solid rings, split rings, and all that. So split rings is another part that might stretch. So for this particular jig, if I actually connect without a snap, let's say I have my split ring and my solid ring, and then I tie on my solid ring, guess what? I have only one weak point. And then it would be the split ring. If it's a fast jig, then that split ring is of no consequence. Okay? So let's use this as an example. Okay? Let's use this and let's do a split ring. It's already there. Let's actually do a real world example. Okay, so I'm gonna take assist hooks. And let's try just a single assist hook. It's not gonna be matched, okay? But it's going to be a good example. Just to illustrate a point. Okay, so there we go. It's not going to be the right size. But like I said, you know, okay. So you have that, okay? And you tie your knot there. So for all intents and purposes, for this particular example, your knot is the only weak link. Now, if I take this snap, and a lot of snaps are actually like this. The biggest advantage, of course, is that you're able to switch things really fast. And this is a very good example of, kind of like how you like things instant. Okay, and there are drawbacks. So for this one, it's fast. Okay, you could switch jigs faster. You won't have to do knots because you just do once. But that part could fail. This part could fail. Your knot could fail. So now you actually have three instead of just one. Now, obviously, if we use this kind of snap, okay, we eliminate one, which is the snap that is welded on this one. Okay, so it could be that this could fail, this could open, that's fine, but we've eliminated this bit right here. Obviously, your knot could fail. And on top of that, of course, if you're fishing in structure, getting nicks, if there's fish that have sharp teeth, of course, that's that's part of all of that. But I think if you just take this off and tie a knot there, then all is good. Obviously, when you're going with slow jigs, what happens is that you have to consider your split ring, and that has to be load bearing. Okay, so from here, okay, the good thing if you're using snaps is, of course, instead of putting a solid ring there, you could use your snap. Okay, and then from there, that's that. Okay, now there are some snaps that are part split ring, they're part snap. And man, I have like the big stuff. I have smallish stuff, and that's 1,000. Smaller stuff as well. Again, and the smallest stuff. Here's the thing. This is the smallest of the lot, right? Oops. I have medium-sized ones. And I have 4 light jigging. I have this, okay? Very tiny, okay? But as you can see, that wire is still quite thick, even if it's small. And, it works. But also kind of restrictive, as you can see here, the space that it has. And this is for those of you that don't know, this is called a quick snap. A quick snap, this is an example of a quick snap. But a lot of people kind of don't care about how thick these things are. Okay, so basically you tie your line here, this end, okay, and it goes like that. Yeah, that's your line there, right here, and then you take that, put it in here, and you're able to actually put the stuff in fast. Okay, I'm sorry, my eyes are failing me. And it's actually easier with Okay, so just so you can see, it's actually fast. It's easier when there's a knot here. Okay, so that, and that's that. Okay, my biggest problem here is that it's actually kind of restrictive. So I again, I go back to that other one. It's really better. Okay, the welded one. Okay, now for this again, you take, there's a lot of styles for this. This is just one of the the styles. So getting it on and off is actually quite fast. So it's easier with a knot actually. Okay, there's bigger sizes, and you could use them for casting plugs and stuff like that. But again, as uh, as I mentioned, they are actually kind of big. Now this is a very small one, and a lot of people would actually use a bigger size. Okay, something something like this right here. So they'd use a big size because, as I illustrated, smaller ones are kind of difficult to work with. So they'll use something this size. Okay. Now compare that to the smaller one that I showed earlier, and you could see, okay, the difference. A lot of people would be using this because it's easier, and also it's not easy to find these things, you know. So there's different styles that are available out there, not just this. So this one has like this shape, okay, that shape, and then there's also uh, this shape right here, which is like a split ring, and all you do is, let's say you take your jig, okay, and then kind of, ouch, okay, so just still the same really, like that, okay, and then bang, see. So it's like a split ring and the snap rolled into one, and then if you want to take it off again, you just kind of pry this off. Now this particular one acts like a split ring. So if it's hard to take off, that's actually a good thing, because it means that if you're having a hard time taking it off, it means the fish will also have a hard time. So I would say that these ones will actually kind of work better than the snap ones. The biggest disadvantage is that the wires that they make these out of is also kind of thick. Okay, so that's the beef of the message right there. I would still rather use that welded snap. Problem is they're not easy to find, but if you can find them, go right ahead and do it. I got mine from Hots. Okay, now swivels, especially on slow jigs. Again, it's the same thing, you know. Slow jigs, you have your split ring. Okay, so you have your split ring like so, and you put a swivel. Use a very, very small one and use this type. Okay, don't use this type. Okay, so this is a crane swivel, this is a barrel swivel, and use the crane swivel and put it there. Okay. There we go. Put it there. And then for some slow jigs, it will give a bit more range of motion when the swivel is new. And the older the swivel, the less it will have the freedom of movement. If you're not sure, use solid rings. Okay, now I generally use split rings and solid rings that are the same size as the eyes. Okay, so like for this one in particular, I put a bigger split ring there because as this was used as an example back in the day when I made a video. But generally, I would put a solid ring and a split ring that's the same size as the eye now. A very good example here is with the solid ring. As you can see, it's approximately the same size or close to the eye. Now, solid rings of that size are actually very difficult to find. However, the guys in the UK actually have solid rings that they use for carp stuff. And here's an example of that. Okay, let me zoom in. So if you're able to actually get your hands on stuff like this, okay, the carp guys have them actually quite small, and I've been using them with good success. But obviously stocks are kind of limited for this, so I use them sparingly, but they're not expensive. So go ahead and actually look around some UK sites. Maybe Amazon UK would have them. But as far as using them is concerned, it's, you know, if it's critical or not, it's not. Okay, you can get away with a bigger size, that's fine, you know, it works. But if you're using smaller jigs and you're using big split rings, they might not have a lot of movement, and of course stealth is another question. So for me, I just put like the smallest that I can find that matches the jig. And how I match it, again, going back, is to match the solid ring with the eye of the jig. Kind of works. And you know what? I've been using that for a long time, and even with the bigger jigs, it becomes kind of standardized. You know, it kind of works. It's proportionally correct. Okay. For most jigs, there are some jigs like the Kensaki that have a really big eye that just kind of doesn't work. Okay. So, solid rings and split rings, very, very important. Let me go back to split rings. I believe that even with especially with the smaller stuff, it becomes very critical because for slow jigs especially, you need a split ring that is load bearing, and I think it's very difficult. It's very difficult for some people to actually remember, especially when they're going to the shop, and or even just, you know what, in fairness, it's also very difficult to find small load bearing split rings. So kind of important for you to be very vigilant when it comes to these things. I am very detail oriented when it comes to these things, and I always want my split rings, solid rings to match. There are people that are okay with like putting bigger split rings and solid rings on there. That's fine. That's for your prerogative, and if it works for you, great. For me, I just don't like um, putting stuff that kind of doesn't match. Okay, my wife has her bags, her shoes, and stuff. I have stuff like this. So this is the normal size of the snaps that I use for really small uh, jigs. Okay, so as you can see, that's also welded. Again, not very easy to find this. That is very small. Okay, right there, as you can see, compared to the grain of my fingers. Very very small, and I have it here. Okay, I always have it here. When I need it, it's there. Okay, so majority of the time I don't use them, because what I do most of the time is actually to tie knots and use the solid ring split rings. Okay, so just a recap. Alrighty, the biggest difference when it comes to the big stuff and the small stuff is that for the smaller stuff you can use a snap. Now for me, the biggest thing about the snaps is the fact that there are a majority of the snaps that you find in the market are just bent. And if it's bent, it can be unbent. Okay, if you can easily snap it on, it could easily snap off. My system has always been to prepare for the worst. So I always pick those hardware or the method that has the least chance of messing up. Okay, so if there's just one place that could mess up, which could be the knot, great, because your whole system is only as good as your weakest link. Remember that. Okay, so your knot is always going to be a weak point. Even if you're like the best knot tire in the world, that knot is still going to be the weakest point, because it's not going to be stronger than any metal that's there. Okay, second point would be split rings. Very very important to have load bearing split rings on slow jigs. On fast jigs, not so much, because you're tying onto the solid ring, and when you tie onto the solid ring, the only thing that split ring is supporting is the weight of the jig. So the rest, as far as that is concerned, it's not load bearing, and that is fine. For slow jigs, that split ring is actually very critical. Okay, that is pretty much the only difference that you have. Also, quick snaps, they're nice, functional, and they work. But the wire that's used on most of them is actually quite thicker than the snaps. So they can still create some resistance in the water, and sometimes that little bubble that it forms gets bit by the fish, and guess what's next to that? It would be your knot. Especially when fish are toothy and all of that, and sometimes fish like barracuda and kingfish, they home in to that little bubble because that reflects light. So for me, my choice is actually that snap with the weld, and that's something that I highly recommend. There are other brands, of course. I'll try to find some on Amazon Japan and then link them if I find them. Okay, if not, then know that I got mine from Hots. Okay, not too sure if they're selling them or still selling them, but I did get it from them because they're the ones that gave me the stuff. And since there's quite a few of them, I haven't been able to, and I don't use them a lot. So now when I'm casting the jigs, which I do for what do you call this, for some jigs and for sometimes, that's when I use them. Okay, that's why in this box right here, you'll find that I have wire. Okay, and you can see that all the snaps. There's some leaders that I use here that are also for braid. You know, sometimes I just kind of use them for other stuff. Like take for example, um, when I'm casting the jigs, and there's a lot of when we're fishing for spangled emperor. Actually, this because these rigged with braid actually becomes useful. But as you can see, all the snaps that I have there are those. Okay, so just to further reinforce that that is exactly what I am using. Another thing to note, by the way, is these swivels right here. Okay, I use these swivels a lot, especially the smaller ones. Okay, and give you a bit of length. So if you put a snap here, okay, like take for example, you put a snap here, that's a very long piece of protection that you can get from toothy fish. So a bonus tip right there. Even if you compare it with similar sized swivel, obviously because it has two barrels, it's longer, so gives you a bit of protection. By the way, also, I tend to stay away from oval split rings. I've used them before, but guess what happens? Okay, so a circle, if you actually put pressure, it becomes oval. Okay, and then after that, it starts stretching open. The ovals are already oval, so it's very easy to split. And guess what? That has happened to me a lot. And those split rings were Centro. They weren't cheap. Okay, they're Korean made. They're actually good quality, but I found that they stretch out, and I haven't used them since. It's just a tip. Okay, so oval split rings, they're nice and everything. They put everything in place, in their proper place, but they tend to stretch out. Okay, so that's again something that you could. I mean, in my experience, I experienced it a few times. After that, I just said I'm not gonna do it anymore. Okay, so that's it for this video. If you have questions, drop them in the comment section. Usual stuff, you know. If you haven't subscribed, subscribe, like, share. Those are the three main things. Support the channel by we have a cap on the bottom right there. Get one so that we can get the brand offline, and then also memberships are a big thing. It really helps drive the channel forward. And thank you very much for those that have signed up to be members. And I'll see you in the next one. Class dismissed.